Dennis Hedges and his son both suffered the same knee injury. Both went to a National Health Service GP. Both went to the same NHS hospital. The son had his operation within 6 weeks. Nearly a year and a half later, his father is still waiting.
It was just so unfair. He was in a lot of pain. I felt really sorry for my dad.
Tonight, World in Action reveals how having the wrong doctor can leave you a loser. Three years ago, the government radically reformed the way the National Health Service is organised. The idea was to apply business methods to medicine, to take it into the marketplace. Critics say it's created a two-tier service for GPs and their patients.
I don't think it's fair. I think it's grossly unfair, in fact. I mean, you have two patients of a similar, perhaps age and similar backgrounds and similar medical condition, and they're not getting the same treatment.
It's a charge the government has consistently and firmly denied.
If you are trying to imply that there is some hospital or hospitals out there that are disadvantaging one group of patients to the benefit of another group of patients, then produce the evidence and I'll look at it.
Tonight, World in Action takes up the Minister's challenge and produces that evidence. We provide cases where patients have lost out and show how the government's political ideology makes them suffer needlessly.
I really wanted to see you today just to go through your last outpatient appointment at the hospital, because I know that you were going to discuss surgery then.
Yes.
What happened?
Well, he did a CAT scan and said that surgery would be beneficial, and he asked if
a doctor's surgery in Shoreham, Sussex. Jane Lee has been suffering from back problems for 7 years. Today she's on a regular visit to her GP, Dr. Alison Smith.
Some days it's as much as I can do to get dressed and get a meal on the table. Another day I may manage to go out shopping. Sometimes I socialise, sometimes I have to break engagements.
Dr. Smith runs a traditional practice. When she sends her patients for hospital treatment, the operation is paid for by the District Health Authority. But in Sussex, there's no money left for treating patients like Jane until April at the earliest.
From my point of view, I mean, all that I can do is try and, when April comes, write to the consultant and say, look, you know, this lady's been suffering for years, we're not talking about months.
Mrs. Lee has been trying to get into hospital for over a year. It may be next Christmas before she's actually treated. We took her to another NHS surgery. Here, the doctor is one of a new breed of GPs. He has his own budget to pay for medical treatments.
And there's a problem about getting any...
He made a surprising offer.
If I was able to say to you that we were able to get a faster treatment for you, say within 2 to 4 weeks at a local hospital, either at one of the two hospitals that you've been seen at the present time, or elsewhere in Surrey and or Sussex, how would that appeal to you?
This system is so unfair.
I have to agree with you, but those are the rules that we're working within at the present time.
In 1989, the government radically reformed the health service. Emergencies and urgent treatments were left alone, but two types of GP were created. When an old-style family doctor sends a patient to hospital for routine, non-urgent surgery, the local health authority pays. It decides which hospital should be used. If the local authority money runs out, operations are delayed until the next financial year. The new-style GPs look after their own budget. They're known as fund holders. They can buy their patients preferential treatment at any hospital they choose. 1 in 4 GPs are now fund holders. To find out how the government's health reforms are working, World in Action first went to Hertfordshire. Here, GP fund holding has taken off in a big way. More than half the county's population are now served by doctors looking after their own budgets. Lincoln House Surgery in Hemel Hempstead. 5 doctors care for more than 12,000 patients. It became a fund-holding practice right at the very start of the government's health reforms.
We have real patient choice, and the patients get a superb choice. They can go to the best consultant that we feel they should see. If they want a certain service, they want to go to a certain hospital, we can do that for them so they get the care effectively and we get good quality care now.
If the new health service reforms have divided patients into winners and losers, then Dr. Archer's grateful patients are the winners.
I was absolutely delighted to be able to receive treatment in such a short time. It did appear that the specialist did operate at 4 different hospitals, and being a fund holder, the doctors here were able to sort of select a hospital where the load wasn't so great, and I was able to get in pretty quickly.
What about nights? I mean,
Mrs. Hilary Shelley's 9-year-old son is terminally ill. As a fund holder, Dr. Archer is able to supply her extra nursing care.
All the time. He's had a few periods of being quite well awake, but on the whole he's comatose, and the nursings that the surgery provide are just invaluable.
The GP fund holders and their patients are doing well out of the health reforms. But what about the patients of those Hertfordshire doctors who remain outside the new system? This is Dr. Falk's surgery in Letchworth. He's a non-fund holder. He believes his patients are being turned into losers.
A patient who had arthritis of the hip, she went to see the consultant in the local hospital and was told that a hip transplant would be in her interests, but she was also told that as we were not fund holders and as it wasn't classed as an emergency or as urgent, that she would have to wait at least 12 months unless she changed the doctor.
The patient then sent this letter to Dr. Falk's.
After much consideration and deliberation, I have decided to change my doctor to a budget holding practice. Following my visit to the consultant, it is quite obvious that I will receive my hip replacement far more rapidly. I'm sorry to have to make this decision, especially as you've been very helpful and supportive all the years we've been with your practice.
Do you regret the changes that are happening in medicine?
Yes, yes. I'd like to retire. I'd like to retire as soon as I came in, but I couldn't manage it. And this is very common in practice these days. Most people feel very fed up with the whole way that it's going.
Next door is the surgery of Dr. Rodney Langstaff. He too is a non-fund holder, but he now feels under increasing pressure to join the new scheme.
We had seen the number of patients on the waiting list at our local hospital rise from, I think, 134 in November 1992 up to 231 in October 1993. For no good reason, really. We hadn't been referring any more patients than usual. We realised that the other practices in the area who were fund holders were able to get their patients seen quickly in outpatients and have their operations done much more quickly than ours were.
Dr. Langstaff decided to write to his local hospital asking for information about the advantages of becoming a fund holder. They were quite frank.
GP fund holders have a distinct advantage over non-fund holders in that they, from the funds allocated to them, are able to get their patients seen on an elective basis. And one of the items at the end of the letter said that inevitably money talks and we have to be influenced, especially by those who are actually buying our services.
Would you say that you've been effectively blackmailed into becoming a fund holder?
Well, it's been the main stimulus. I don't think you'd call it blackmail, but it's the main stimulus for us to become fund holders. Because if we carry on as we are, then the waiting list for our patients, we think, will just get longer.
One bizarre result of the new funding system is that winners and losers can be thrown up in the same family. Dennis Hedges and his son, also called Dennis, both suffered knee injuries at work. Both were referred to the same hospital. There the similarities ended. The son's GP is a fund holder. The father's is a non-fund holder.
My accident happened in March. I saw my consultant on August 6th. He suggested that it would take anything up to 18 months.
I had my operation within 5 weeks of seeing the consultant. I felt really sorry for my dad. He couldn't believe it when I got my appointment. I couldn't believe it when I got my appointment. It was just so unfair. He was in a lot of pain. I just had it, and been in sort of pain for a couple of months, and he'd been 8, 9 months, and it's just so unfair.
We thought it was strange because, as a matter of fact, my son queried the actual appointment from the hospital, bearing in mind that his name is the same as mine, and he thought that should have been for me. So he queried it at the hospital, and I said, no, it's for him. My son had it instead of myself.
He's been put back so many times. He's phoned up and said, oh yes, it's going to be in 3 months, and it's been put back another 3 months and another 3 months. It's just so much frustration, and he's been in so much pain that it just must be getting to him.
I am now registered disabled. I have sciatica at night, so I'm awake half the night. I sleep in a separate room occasionally. It's just a complete deterioration of my physical capabilities I've had over this time. Had I been done 18 months ago, this might have stopped. It might have helped me.
Architect Mark Fenton had a back injury which left him in severe pain for 2 years. After his first hospital appointment, he thought he was a winner. He was wrong.
A CT scan was arranged, which showed that I required an operation. The doctor went on to tell me that fortunately, he did stress fortunately, my GP was a fund holder and the operation would be done within 3 months. Anyway, 10 weeks later I rang the hospital. I hadn't heard anything, and I was told that my GP was in fact a non-fund holder and I had 18 months to wait for the operation.
In Hertfordshire, there's increasing evidence of the existence of a two-tier system. But what about the rest of England? Manchester law student Tony O'Malley suffers severe problems with his eyes.
If you can imagine taking a big blob of Vaseline and smearing it all over your eye and then trying to see through it, that would give you a pretty good idea of what a cataract actually looks like.
He used to be with a fund-holding GP who paid for a private operation to remove a cataract. Now he's with a non-fund-holding GP. He needs another operation, but can't get it.
I'd like all GPs to play on a level playing field. I chose my GP because of that GP's reputation, which is excellent. And I think that's what patients should be choosing the GPs on, not whether or not they've got access to funds that their neighbouring GP doesn't.
Tony's waiting for an operation at Manchester's Royal Eye Hospital, but internal correspondence reveals that patients here receive different treatments. Contracts for fund-holding GPs specify a maximum delay of 4 weeks between new referral and first appointment. Non-fund-holding doctors have been told there is an indefinite wait for a routine new patient appointment. Professor David MacLeod, the clinical director, adds, these arrangements conform to my understanding of what is meant by the term two-tier service.
The waiting list at the eye hospital to see a consultant prior to the NHS changes was about 15 to 18 months. I was under the impression to begin with that it was similar, but now I'm finding out that my patients are not even being seen. So it would appear that since the changes have come in, the situation has worsened rather than improved. It's probably improved for fund holders, but at our expense.
There's still signs of catarrh in that ear. Have you got a good ear and a bad ear?
Yes.
Which is the worst one? Yeah, that looks like it's still affected.
Next, Sussex. 10-year-old Lewis Richmond has fluid in his ear. It's causing increasing problems with his education.
But his hearing will fluctuate. So he'll have good weeks and bad weeks. And the difficulty for school is that you're missing out on a few weeks here and there, and it builds up over time.
Well, that's what we can
Last July, Lewis was referred to the Princess Royal Hospital in Haywards Heath. In November, his GP received this letter from the consultant surgeon. I'm not sure when he'll be admitted. As you know, this hospital at the moment is not allowing me to admit the patients of non-fund-holding practices. The earliest that Lewis can be admitted to hospital is now April.
In April, then, when there is funding available, will we have to reapply for a place on the waiting list, or do we actually just carry you straight through from position now?
You'll still be on the waiting list, but you have to wait for the other people above you on the waiting list to be treated first. The problem is the fund holders will still have a priority, in as much that they often do use their monies to buy the services privately. So, for instance, if I referred someone now, the waiting time to see the ENT specialist is about 5.5 months, and then he'll be put on a waiting list. So, referring someone now, it will be around Christmas time before he'll be seen. Whereas the fund holder going privately, it could be 2 or 3 weeks.
What we're being told is that district health authorities are underfunded by comparison with fund-holding doctors, with the result that they run out of money for elective care, and the fund-holding colleagues are, of course, able to push their patients through very quickly. Can you see why this is confusing for patients?
Well, let me tell you that I don't believe that that's true. We work quite hard to ensure that fund holders only get that proportion of the resources which is their due in terms of the number of patients for whom they have responsibility. We started that funding arrangement on a historic basis because we had to start somewhere. We're rapidly moving to a formula basis. And while I hear some of these throwaway lines, as you have just done, a throwaway line, no one actually brings evidence to me as the Minister for Health saying, here is demonstrably an unfair financial arrangement. Would you please look at it? And if anybody did, I would.
In Birmingham, there's more evidence for the Minister. Here, a patient is first a loser, then a winner, and finally a loser again.
The patient received an appointment for at least 34 weeks after he'd been referred. We wrote to the hospital, and within 3 days we had a phone call back from the hospital apologising because they didn't realise we were a fund-holding practice, and the patient should have been given an appointment for 4 weeks. When we pointed out to the hospital that in fact we were not the fund-holding practice, there was this long embarrassed silence, which was rather difficult for them to explain.
Last month, Dr. Zuckerman received a letter from the Alexandra Hospital in Redditch. It clearly spelt out the difference in waiting times between the two types of patients.
In one speciality, radiotherapy, the length of time that the fund-holding patients had to wait was only 3 weeks compared to 8 weeks by the patients of the non-fund-holding practice. Now, when it comes to radiotherapy, you're talking about the treatment of cancer, and the treatment that patients receive should not be based on whether their doctor is a fund holder or a non-fund holder. It must be based on clinical need. And I think this is an absolutely appalling situation.
How are you getting on at work?
Well, I've had to come home early again yesterday because it was so painful.
Okay. And can you tell me whereabouts the pain is?
It's all down here.
Finally, a surgery in Kentish Town, London. Barbara Thane suffers from varicose veins. She finds it difficult to walk, has problems sleeping, and regularly misses work. Her GP's been trying to get her into hospital since last September.
What I'm going to do now is ring the manager at the hospital and get moving much more quickly. I don't think you can cope if you don't get any sleep.
How is the two-tier system affecting her chances of getting that operation?
Well, the hospital says it's got no money. It's run out of money. Now, we were told that it had run out of money last September. In other words, 6 months into the year. We were also told that if we were fund holders, then we could pay for that operation, because we would have had extra funds from the government in order to pay for that. Now that patently is unfair. It's unfair to us as general practitioners, but most of all it's unfair to poor Mrs. Thane. If she is lucky, perhaps July, August, she will get an operation. She may even get it before that. But if I didn't cry help loudly and to the right people, she might then be on the waiting list for another year or two.
We would not develop a system where one group was deliberately disadvantaged at the expense of another. And I don't have any evidence. And I have to say that you can keep throwing the questions because that's your prerogative, but I will be more impressed if you actually produce chapter and verse.
Sue there, please. It's Dr. Singer. I rang her yesterday.
To test how easy it is for fund-holding doctors to jump their patients to the front of the queue, we asked a London GP to pretend to be a fund holder.
It was also for cataract surgery and for hip replacements.
He rang 10 hospitals. 8 of them were prepared to offer special deals to GP fund holders. And there were more surprises.
I was offered a price for a hip replacement of £2,900, but it was explained to me that there may be end-of-year bargains available, or that if I was able to cobble together 2 or 3 patients, they might be able to offer me a different deal overall. And I find this really quite objectionable.
That would be fine. Thanks very much. Bye.
It felt like I was just looking through the yellow pages for a plumber, rather than a GP sorting out care for patients. It has introduced the really nasty end of market marketing into healthcare. And I think that my job is to look after people and to refer them to hospital as necessary. And if their clinical condition changes, it's my job to inform the consultant and ask if higher priority can be given. But I don't like it being sorted out just on the checkbook.
Last year, Dr. Graham Rudd, a fund holder GP from Stevenage, committed suicide. He wrote, "I have had enough of work as it is these days, and I cannot face it any more."
He just felt that the whole trend of medicine was going towards paperwork rather than towards the patient. And that was his main concern in that area. It was more paperwork than seeing the patients, and that's what he couldn't take. Because after all, they went into medicine not to become businessmen, but to, you know, help people and help their illnesses and so on and so forth. They shouldn't have to decide who they're going to help and who they're not going to help.
A recent survey revealed that the majority of ordinary fund holders are unhappy with the new system. 66% claim they were forced to join the scheme despite having reservations. In hospitals too, senior doctors are complaining about the effects of the NHS reforms. Chris Poole is a consultant orthopaedic surgeon at the Stoke Mandeville Hospital in Buckinghamshire.
Major work we do in the ward is joint replacements. And these are people who are crippled with arthritic pain, who may have been suffering for years with their pain and require joint replacement. And they're the ones who are suffering, particularly if they're non-fund holding patients.
Because they're spending months on a list.
Because they spend months on a waiting list.
What we're going to do is we're going to take the muscle off the bone here, all right?
After being told he could no longer operate on non-fund holding patients, Chris Poole wrote to local GPs. He complained that he and his fellow consultants were being blackmailed.
It was made clear that if one didn't bring in the fund holding patients, there would be no money coming into this hospital. And if no money comes into this hospital, then the hospital is at risk. And the jobs of people who work here at risk.
So it left you with no choice?
Well, I had the choice of either resigning or acquiescing to the request.
Well, the purpose of this chat, Mrs.
Beverly Webb is a consultant gynaecologist at the Lister Hospital in Stevenage. He provides more evidence that a two-tier system does exist within the National Health Service.
Okay. If I saw a major case, I can bring that patient in by the end of February. For a non-fund holding patient with a similar non-urgent benign condition, I would have to at the moment put her on a waiting list which is 15 months. If I were incontinent every time I coughed or sneezed, or when I was out shopping I had to rush to the toilet and then wet myself before I got there, I think I'd want something done very urgently about it. And I think if I saw a gynaecologist who said to me, "I'm sorry Mrs. Jones, but because your general practitioner is not a fund holder, you've got to wait another 15 months before I can do anything for you," I'd be very angry.
The picture we're getting is that the orderly, if you like, the British queue is gone, and the fund holders are jumping it.
Well, frankly, if you won't accept what I am telling you, then there is no point in me being repetitious.
World in Action has learned that the Health Secretary is now studying a confidential report from the Surgical Royal Colleges. It reveals that 1 in 3 general surgeons working in NHS hospitals and 1 in 2 gynaecologists have been forced to give priority to fund-holding patients. Last week, Dennis Hedges Sr. finally had his knee operation, 18 months after his injury cost him his job.
Well, I'm relieved it's actually come at last, very relieved. If anything's found now that could have been corrected a few months ago, obviously I will feel very, very bitter about it. It's just one of those things. I just feel sorry for people in my sort of condition, or with the same sort of problem I've got, that are going through it now. For me, there's definitely a two-tier system.